Well, hey there and welcome to another one of my crazy YouTube videos. On this video, we're going to get the old motorhome ready for a trip. And I thought, well, there's a lot of people out there with converted school buses and also who are new to owning motorhomes or bigger vehicles. So I'm going to show you what all I look at. And this is not everything. Whatever you think needs to be looked at, look at it. Better yet, look at everything. But let's cover a few things I think are important. So come on, let's get started. Look everything over. Look for things that might be broken or busted or twisted or whatever. Look for obvious damage. And I'll look underneath and I'm going to look for leaks. That's actually something I do every time I approach my motorhome or any other vehicle for that matter. So far, this old 1972 Travco that I put a Cummins in has been quite dry. I'm going to look at previous repairs or problems I know I got, like my window gasket is old and rotten and I have yet to replace it because I don't want to bust the windows. So I put some black 3M 5200 sealant in there. It's a marine sealant, and so far it's held up real good. I just freak out about someday I'm going to be bouncing down the highway, my whole driver's side windshield's going to fall out on the ground, but so far it seems like it's still got a good hold. Those windows ain't cheap if you can get them, and I'm not interested in busting one right yet. Let's talk about wheels and rims. But sometimes you'll see rust coming off lug nuts, like streaks of it. That's indication that your lug nuts have gotten loose. Now let's talk about what kind of rims I got here. These are Bud rims. Not all dually rims are Bud rims. These use Bud nuts. This square one is the inner nut. The inner nut holds the inner wheel on, and it's also got threads to hold the outer wheel on. On Bud nuts, the left-hand side are left-hand threads. So if you righty-tighty, lefty-loosey trying to work with these, you're going to have a big problem. Your valve stems should be 180 degrees off. That way you can get to the inside one through this outside hole with a hose adapter that's made for them. Bud wheels, the nuts, the inner nuts and the outer nuts are all cone shape, and they center on the rim. They center the rim. So it's the nuts themselves that center the rim on the hub. The newer style of rims are hub centering. This is a hub centered rim. There's no dish for the Bud nuts to seat into to center it. It centers actually on a machine surface on the hub. It doesn't use Bud nuts because it's just one lug nut on a long stud. So both wheels are shoved on and the lug nuts tighten. I'm not sure what these tighten to, but the Buds tighten to about 450 foot-pounds. You may have motorhomes with what they call coined rims. Every other hole, this one's protrudes out and this one protrudes in. So every other one is opposite from the other. It is important that when you put dualies together that you don't have two sticking out hitting each other. On the hub for the dualies on the coin rims, there's a stud that goes into this slot. Align the slots up with the studs and it will help keep you from making the mistake of improperly installing it. Okay, let's crawl underneath the motorhome and check her out. While I'm underneath here, I want to look at everything. So just if you're doing this, just take your time and lay here and look around. Look at your exhaust. Are the hangers all still in place? I brought my grease gun. I'm going to hit all these zerts. I'm going to look to see if grease actually pushes through, because a couple of these zerts on the back of these springs have never wanted to take grease. The size of the pins that actually hold the springs on aren't that big, so if you ever have one of those break, your axle's going to want to come on out. She's at least going to shift around on you. Let me take a minute and brag to you about how I did my fuel system back here. The old 70-gallon tank was pretty dirty, and at first I took it out, filled it with muriatic acid and water solution, and I dropped a chain in there, and I kept sliding the chain around inside the tank to knock rust loose, and I let the acid sit in there for a couple of days. Did a fair job, but I still kept getting debris getting into my filter. And also I had a 90 coming off of this fitting I welded on the bottom. So it came off at a 90, and that 90 is where stuff got clogged up. So I went ahead, actually that's when I welded a bigger fit in here, and I actually got a 1/2 inch fuel line going up, and there's no bend. That allows debris to flow easily through this line. And I got this trap. This big canister is a trap, and this line feeds a straight shot into the canister, so it allows debris to fall to the bottom. And you can actually take the bottom of the canister off to clean it. And you also got a petcock to where you can drain water out of it, because being low here, water's going to settle down in this trap. This line comes off of the trap on the other side and comes back this way through this clear filter. And this filter's been on here for a couple years now, and it's staying very clean. So this lets me know, if I'm just by quick look, how my system looks. So, and I did clean the trap out a year ago or so, and it was completely clean. And then it goes to an electric fuel pump, which pushes fuel to the front of the motorhome. The only drawback is this line, the way it sweeps, it kind of drops down. I mean, it's still a good 14 inches off the ground, but it's at risk of being hit. It'd have to be something pretty big coming underneath this motorhome. It's important that you wipe your grease fittings off before you put the grease gun on it, and make sure your grease gun stays clean. You see a lot of grease poured out. This is a zert right here. A lot of grease poured out right here, but I see some old grease back in the corner here. But I do have concern that the grease is not traveling between the pin and the spring. Next time I grease it, see if that little dirt spot there gets any better. As things move around, sometimes they get better. It almost justifies taking all this apart and cleaning it up. But that'd be a different project for a different day. All right, let's talk about the rear axle. I know this is a pretty big crescent wrench for this little old plug. So anyways, when you go to check your oil, stick your little finger in there and just bend at the knuckle and see if you come out with oil on. So that's good. Don't bear down real hard on this plug. Supervisor's here. I used to service a man's dump truck, and his rear plug for his rear differential, I could screw it and probably force it all the way through, and it would pop into the differential if I wasn't careful. It had been tightened so many times that it was totally wore out. So I snugged it down. That's what it needs. Now up top here is a breather. See this little cap? Spin it around, just kind of play with it to get the dirt knocked out of there. After a couple of oil changes, my pinion seal, this is sealed right up in here on the other side, it was leaking pretty good and it was running down here. It's because the breather was plugged up, and if pressure, as things get hot in the axle and pressure builds, it needs to go somewhere. And just by twisting it, the leak virtually stopped. I've never had to add anything to this differential. But I look up in here and I look for signs of oil leaking, dripping down on the rims or wet back up inside here that tell me that my hub seal, my axle hub seal, is leaking, and it's not. I just looked my calipers over, and I guess I can actually fill up in here, fill this brake pad I've got left on them. I got tons of pad on here. I can feel it. While I'm underneath here, I am checking wires, metal lines, brake lines. I'm just taking my time looking things over. You just need to put your eyeball on it, look closely, and look for things. You might say, oh my God, there's a, you know, I got a cracked spring, or something's about to break, or like with me, my axle bolts or my U-bolts for my axles were getting loose. Just look things over carefully. Oh no, both of my supervisors are here. What did I do wrong? George, Smokey, what did I do wrong? Am I in trouble? Okay, I just pumped grease in this U-joint, and grease is coming out all four bearings of all four caps of the U-joint. Also, I want to wiggle the dry shaft, push up and down. Try to force it to be sloppy. Feels pretty good. Okay, what I want to do, gotta get a different wrench. I want to drop the carrier bearings, unbolt them from the cross members. I got a couple jack stands here. Let them fall on the jack stands. Then I want to spin the bearing. Make sure my carrier bearings aren't rumbling. Make sure they spin smoothly. Check my rubber. Make sure that the rubber inside here is good. It probably is. It's been a source of concern for me for a long time, because I never changed these carrier bearings. But by gosh, I had them in my hand. I actually cut these dry shafts and shortened them myself, and I used the carrier bearings to center the dry shafts on. So I mean, I had them and I messed with them, but I got a video on shortening the dry shafts on this machine. Am I saying that that was the right way to do things? No. But what I'm saying, you just have to watch the video. This thing runs smooth as silk. This slip yoke right here has got a zert on it. It's up on the top side, and this bearing needs to be greased. I'll grease those. I'll go get a 11/16 and a 5/8 would be on the other side of this, so I can knock these bolts loose and drop them out of here. And also, if you eyeball, which you can't from here, but when we're on the other side differential, if I eyeball down all these three dry shafts, they kind of did this number. So I feel I need to eliminate the washers on this carrier bearing, because they got to run kind of a straight shot. Okay, I knocked the carrier bearing loose from the cross member. Spinning it, feels good. Not feeling any slop. Not feeling any rumbling or hearing any rumbling either. Carrier bearings last a long time, but when they go bad, they can create a lot of problems. If this bearing, there's a race that's pressed onto this shaft right here, and if this race were to get really hot, they'll sometimes seize to the shaft. First, that makes them almost impossible to get off. Second, that means they'll probably tear your splines up on your shaft, which means you need to have a new end of your shaft welded to the tube. So that's why I dropped them out. I just tell myself, man, them carrier bearings, I didn't really check them, did I? Of course I probably did, I just don't remember. So I'll put this one back up, and when I get up to the front one there, I'll drop it down and check it out. The leaf springs have zerks on the front bushing also. When you're checking things out, no matter where you are actually, look at your wiring. Ask yourself, could these wires rub through where they're touching the frame? You know they're lightly touching? Yes, they can. Same with this wire over here. Even worse, you'll see, you may find wires that are pulled tight around an edge like this. And you may see that from the factory. And I have seen that on brand new machines where they were careless on how they ran wiring, and they ran around a sharp edge like this. It's just asking to vibrate through, to rub through as the machine vibrates. Okay, I'm checking my part brake linkage. My part brake is actually a drum on the back of the transmission. Mine doesn't hold that great, and I'm thinking that right here with a cable, this is the cable going into, I don't know if you can see it. It goes into it right here. So the fulcrum between this point where it's pulling and here probably needs to be a little bit longer. I could probably make this plate and make this piece right here just a little bit longer, but I really want my part brake to hold better than it does. I mean, it holds, but it doesn't hold good. I'm scared to over tighten it, that something's going to fail. This little block here I made, I drilled it out, walled it out to where the pin would drop, the cable and everything would drop through, and it's holding up. It's not breaking on me, but I need this to work better without having to apply so damn much force to it. Another thing I'm going to check while I'm underneath here, on my rear motor mounts. I drilled out the frame and installed truck style motor mounts in this unit. Some people just use the Dodge motor mounts, which is 2 mounts forward on the engine block and then a transmission mount. Well, this transmission just hangs freely with no mounts whatsoever, and that's the way it was in its machine. But I just want to check the motor mounts, make sure they're not wallering out, make sure the bolts ain't coming loose, and make sure the frame's not cracking. And just check the linkage, make sure things aren't in the way of other things. Like this could stand to be tied back. This right here harness, the way it rubs against the frame, could stand to be wired tied up inside there. Like I said, this could stand to be tied back. It's not really in the way of anything moving, but it could be better. Okay, as I'm doing my inspection, this is the flywheel housing, and I see some wetness back in here, but it's open. It's got a hole right here open. And actually, it's quite dry inside. See that? So this oil is coming from somewhere else. The rear main could have a little leak, but I don't think so. I think if the rear main was leaking, it would be leaking into the flywheel housing. So anyways, I see that dampness there, and it sends out an alarm, and I investigate it, and it looks like my torque converter is still nice and dry inside of there. So I'm going to move forward. I'm going to grease my tie rod ends, and you'll check those by grabbing them and pulling up and down on them. Up and down to try to get some play in here. There's one on each end. I'm going to grease my upper kingpin, my lower kingpin, which is down underneath here, and we'll jack up one tire and we'll put a bar on it and we'll check it for play and try to show you a little bit of that, which is not necessary to do, but you definitely want to grease your upper and lower kingpin joints, your tie rod ends, and you got your drag link going from the steering knuckle up top here all the way forward to the arm of the steering box. Up inside here on the kingpin where it travels through, there's a thrust bearing. That holds the weight of the front end of the truck. So when you push the grease through the bottom, where it's going to go up there and get up in this thrust bearing. You want to place the jack closer to the spring, not in the center of the axle. Even though the jack's holding the weight, I got blocks to support it. Okay, let's talk about checking your kingpins and your wheel bearings. Your kingpins will wear over time. Remember, you're dealing with a very heavy tire. Rocking side to side, we'll check the tie rod ends and the drag link. And you can have someone crawl underneath there and visually look for play in the links. But you can also feel it if you had slop in there. Up and down would be good on the thrust bearing for the kingpin. I'm not getting anything there. And there's another check. And actually a heavier bar underneath would work good, but I'm not jacking it up any higher. You take a bigger bar and you rock on the rim. I'm resting on the caliper actually. Try and get it to rock. Trying to push the top of the rim up and in. No matter what tool I use, I'm not getting any kind of rock at all. I'm checking it this way, and that'd be the bushings in the kingpins itself. So if I had any play, I would check my wheel bearings, make sure they're adjusted properly. And if the wheel bearings are adjusted properly and there's no play in there, my play would have to be in the kingpin bushings. These tires and rims are heavy, so you can fool yourself by thinking you don't have any play. Put it at an angle like this, I got a better chance of actually getting it to rock. I don't want to hit my fender here. There's no rock in this whatsoever. My kingpins are good and tight. So that would be the inspection basically of the front end. As far as the engine goes, check your oil. I will get some on my finger, feel it, see if it's tacky and sticky. I'll also see where it is on the dipstick, of course. And if I know where it was, and now I see it growing, I'm actually gaining oil on my dipstick, then it's time to be concerned about a leaking fuel pump. I smell it and see if I smell any fuel or anything else in there that doesn't smell right. I'm not worried about it being black, especially on a diesel. This engine I can change the oil and it'll start it up the first time. It'll immediately be black again. Check, make sure it doesn't have water in the oil. It'll be milky if it's got water in the oil. You know, I'd like to know condition of the engine, and you can't really do that with new oil. Sometimes someone selling something will change the oil to cover something up. Next thing you want to do is check the transmission oil. Most of the time it'll be an automatic, and 99.9% of automatics, you got to check whether it's running, except for mine. I put this engine together and I purposely set the oil lever where I want it with it shut off. That's because I had to cut my own dipstick. It was just a lot more convenient for me to put in the right amount of oil and mark my dipstick. Some applications you're supposed to put it in forward for so long, put it in reverse for so long, then put it in neutral. So read up on the transmission and see how the manufacturer wants it checked. As far as the transmission oil, when you check it, put a little bit on your fingers. It should be red if that's what it's got in there. It shouldn't smell burnt. If it looks burnt and smells burnt, then your transmission is starting to have a problem or has a problem, which is your clutch is slipping and burning. Next thing I want to do, and I do it on every engine that I check out, is I reach up and I grab the fan. I try to wiggle it and see if there's any rock going on. If it's rocking, and if it's a gas engine where the fan is the water pump, you need to be careful that your water pump's about to go out. If you get any rock, any play in the bearings. This is Cummins. This fan bearing system is its own system. The water pump is somewhere else on the engine. I'd also check, fill up underneath the belt. In this case, I look around the belt every which way I can, but I can't get in there too well. But I'll try to examine that belt and look for it coming apart and showing signs of wear. And there's also a second belt on this thing and a V-belt, and I would check it. Check the V-belt for tension, and I just do that by going in between the two pulleys and pushing on it looking for deflection. I check the engine over for anything that, you know, wetness, signs of leaks. Check my linkage. Of course, you're going to check your antifreeze. Make sure it looks a good color, whatever color it's supposed to be. You could pull the intake side off the turbo, reach up inside there and rock it. See if there's play. There shouldn't be any play in there, and if there is, it should be very minimal. What happens is that bearing starts to go out, the fan gets a lot of rock to it, and then touches the sides of the housing, and then starts throwing metal shavings into your intake system. So you'd like to know that your turbo is good. But that's something I definitely would check on something that I was buying. I just give everything a good once over. Check the wiring, make sure it's like it's supposed to be. Well, there's plenty of other things you can check on your motorhome. You know, what we looked at today doesn't even cover the house systems. It's mainly just the drivetrain and the running gear. A clogged air filter can ruin a turbocharger. So take your filter out, blow it out, use compressor to blow any dust and stuff off the filter. It creates too much of a suction trying to pull that air through a clogged filter that the seals in the turbocharger will start to leak, and motor oil will wind up going directly into your engine, and you'll start blowing smoke. So old air filter is very important. You want to check your master cylinder, your level of your brake fluid, checking for leaks. One of the leaks you may have found would be a wheel caliper or wheel cylinder leaking. So check your fluid in your master cylinder, and if it's down, you might want to go look for a leak. Every machine's built different, so get to know your machine, get to know how your machine's supposed to be inspected. And by giving a really thorough inspection before you go somewhere, you really reduce the risk of having a failure on the way. I hope this helps you. I hope you like my video. Please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and remember, if you love life and learning new things, go aimless.com.